Well, good morning and welcome to Deepwater Baptist Church on the first Sunday of 2021. Often on the first Sunday of the new year, the customary thing to do is to talk about resolutions or future plans and that sort of thing. But somehow at the moment and after the year that we've had, it didn't feel quite right to me to follow that sort of cliched message. So we'll think about something different this morning maybe. But those of you who know me well are likely to remember that I enjoy a game of Scrabble. And recently I picked up these letters on my tray, and quite quickly I realised I could shuffle them round to make a 7-letter word. So here we go. And there is my 7-letter word. Scored me quite well, but what a word, despair. But maybe that's a word that sums up how a lot of us have felt at times during the last 9 months or a year or so. Despair. But anyway, we'll come back to my Scrabble game a bit later. But I wanted to share a verse with you for the new year to give us a focus. And it comes from the Good News Bible, and it's Genesis 8 and verse 13. And it says this: On the first day of the first month, the water was gone. On the first day of the first month, the water was gone. What a strange verse. But it comes within the story of Noah and the ark. And we find Noah at the age of 601 enjoying a very special New Year's Day. On the first day of the first month, the water had gone. And after about a year or so stuck in his ark, drifting around on the waters, in all the flooded devastation, he discovers on the first day of the first month that the water had finally all gone. Now, I'm sure most of you recall something of this remarkable story, and I do want us to explore more about Noah for the next few minutes. So this is a little bit one of those films there you see the end first and then have flashbacks to see how they got there. So we've come to the end of Noah's story, that on the first day of the first month, the water had gone. But what happened in the lead up to that momentous New Year's Day? Well, first of all, we're introduced to Noah as someone who was a bit different. In Genesis chapter 6 and verse 9, we read, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. So Noah was a good man who was blameless and lived in fellowship with God. In fact, he walked with God. What does that mean? If you walk with God, I think it means he could hear his voice and be sure that it was God. We read earlier that Adam and Eve used to walk with God in the garden. So my first question to you is, do we ever take a stroll with God? Do we go on a walk away from the crowd? Just the two of you? Of course, in Tier 4, we can go out with a walk with just one other person. So I'm going to suggest that when we go for our walk in Tier 4, that one other person should be God this year, and we should go for a walk with him. What do I mean by that? Well, I think walking with God involves building a relationship with him, listening to him, talking to him, deepening our trust in him, spending time, getting to know him better. And I think that's something we can definitely learn from Noah. He walked with God. Well, how do we know that that made any difference? How is that evidenced? Well, if we read on in that chapter of Genesis and the next one, twice we read that Noah did everything that God commanded him. We read the details of building the ark, all the specifications, those precise sizes and measurements, what materials he should use, all about the animals and the food that was needed. Noah followed the instructions exactly. He did exactly everything that God had commanded of him. Why? Why did he do that? Well, it wasn't because he was some kind of robot. Noah wasn't like Alexa, who just automatically obeys your voice. Go and do something, Noah, and Noah did it without thinking or without having to question it. No, Noah did what God asked him to, out of trust, out of faith, and out of love. And we know that too, because in the middle of that chapter of Genesis, when God is giving Noah all the instructions, all the details about how to build the ark, God says, I will establish my covenant with you. So it was a two-way relationship. That's what a covenant is. It's a promise. It's a commitment between two people. Noah did what God wanted him because he wanted to please him and to do what's right. He didn't doubt that what God was asking him to do was the right thing. His faith and his hope in God was total. So I want to have another look at my Scrabble tiles. So remember a few minutes ago I made this word. Well, I then shuffled them around a bit. And I could make another 7-letter word. Can you see that? The word is aspired. Aspired. What does that mean? Well, to aspire to something, that means we have hope. We're looking forward. We're aspiring to something that's not despair, but the opposite, in fact. And that's what Noah did. He aspired to see God's will done in his situation. We too can be filled with aspiration and with hope in that same relationship with God this year. I like the very simple definition that's given to us in the first verses of Hebrews about what faith is. It says, faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. Being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see. And I think that's something that we should hold on to with aspiration as we enter 2021. There are several things that I think we can learn too from the story of Noah in the early chapters of Genesis, once we've expressed our faith and our aspiration in God. Noah discovered, first of all, that he resources us. God told Noah to get 2 of every sort of animal into the ark. But then we read later in chapter 7 that the animals came to Noah. He didn't go searching for them. He didn't have to hunt down all those different species and kinds of animals to make sure he had 2 for the ark. God provided them. The animals came to Noah. And I want to assure you this morning that whenever God expects us to do something for him, he provides all that we need, all the resources that we need to achieve what he's given us to do. Another thing I want us to pick up from the story of Noah this morning is that God shuts the door on the past. We read in Genesis 7 and verse 16 that once everyone was on board, we read, the Lord shut him in. God closed the door. God shut the door of the ark on all the old problems that were outside. So Noah wasn't tempted to look back at the way things were. It was gone forever. God can make us safe from anything which has hurt us or caused us pain or despair. He wants us to be with him on the new journey that he has planned for us. He has shut the door on what went before. And he doesn't want us to be hankering for the way things were. he has a new plan for each one of us, and he keeps us safe the way he kept Noah safe, by shutting the door on what had gone before. Another thing I think we can pick up from the story of Noah is that God is in charge of the future. Have you ever thought, how did Noah steer the ark? It had no sails, it had no rudder, certainly had no engine. It was just a box. We read in chapter 7 and verse 18, the waters rose and increased greatly, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. So its speed, its course, its direction were entirely in God's hands. Noah was not in control. He didn't need to worry about that. God was directing things. Noah was too busy with the job that he had to do anyway, feeding the animals, cleaning them out, wondering what the woodpeckers were up to, I suppose. But how often do we want to tell God what he is and isn't allowed to do in our lives? But what if we had nothing but God to rely upon? What if all our possessions and security, our home and our food were all gone? What about the difficulties that we're facing today with COVID? Do we blame God for that? Or do we trust him that he is in control and the future is safely in his hands? And the other thing I think we can learn is, as the rain stopped and the waters receded, we read in chapter 8 and verse 4, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. The ark had reached its point of rest, the place where God had designed for it to be. Indeed, Noah's name is derived from the Hebrew word nuah, and that means to rest. We also need to learn to rest in God, especially in these stressful and difficult days. So, I think Noah's story has a lot of relevance to our situation today. We may feel that we've had a long time just drifting aimlessly along during this pandemic and lockdown, full of uncertainties for the future, hankering maybe for the way things used to be, even when they had faults. We're still unclear when things will change or when things will improve. We're certainly not in control. There's sadness, there's hurt, and there is still despair. But as we've seen, Noah aspired to place all his faith in God and was proved right. That on that New Year's Day, when he was 601, on the first day of the first month, the water was gone. And what was Noah's reaction when that happened? Well, back to my Scrabble words. Let's have a look. He praised. Noah, when he was safe on dry land, set up an altar and praised God. You see, everything can be turned and changed with God's help. We should be thankful and praise him and learn to give him the glory in all circumstances. So from despair, Noah aspired, and ultimately he praised through those difficult times. So remember, Noah wasn't a professional in the art of shipbuilding. We're not professionals in the art of ark building or even church building or even life building. But Noah relied completely on God, and the ark was floating and was safe. Remember, the professionals who were shipbuilders built the Titanic. And what happened to that? We can rely entirely on God to give us the instructions, to give us the ideas, and to be in control. And after the storm, there was blessing. There was a rainbow. Let's remember that nothing is impossible with God. May God bless you in 2021. Bye-bye.